Councilor Orlando, can you hear me? Thank you.
You're live, Your Worship.
Mr. LaSalle. All right, Council, I'd like to call this regular council meeting on March 26, 2024 to order with adoption of the agenda. So I want to make that motion for me, Councilor Cherry, second by Councilor Orlando. All in favor? Motion's carried. Adoption of the minutes of the regular council meeting of March 12th. Councilor Palmer, Councilor Devlin, all in favor? Motion's carried.
Your Worship.
Go ahead.
I'm sorry, just regarding the minutes there. I feel that item 3A is maybe reflective of what was said in the meeting, but not reflective of the facts, and I'm trying to find a way to rectify that. That was regarding the March 12th minutes. The discussion at hand was regarding the name of the person moving the notice of motion not being reflected on the March 12th agenda under unfinished business, as well as on the February 27th agenda.
Okay. Comment, Ms. Boyd, on that? And so, go ahead.
Sorry, through your worship to Councilor Orlando. Item 3A.
I believe that's correct, yes.
And is there a way that you feel it should be reflected that is not in those minutes?
The final sentence says, Mayor Saul stated that the point of order was not well taken as Councillor Cherry was named. In review of the documents and for preparation for this meeting, I don't believe Councillor Cherry was named in either one. And that as a result, anyone going through the minutes to find out what happened would not be able to discern where the notice of motion came from. For me, it's just a procedural thing, but that is the reflection there. That may have been what was stated at the meeting. I don't recall, but in fact, that is not factual. So I'm hoping to strike the last sentence.
Okay. Council, any comments on that last sentence? Councilor Palmer?
So through the mayor, you're fine with everything except for the last sentence?
That's correct. So the sentence starting with Mayor Saul stated.
So I would suggest then we just strike that last sentence off the minutes.
Well, we could, thank you, Your Worship, through to Councilor Orlando. The minutes of the 27th do state notice of motion. Councilor Cherry requested the following be added to subsequent council agendas on the 27th.
My recollection is that the notice of motion was emailed to me a minute before the meeting started. So that's where I'm coming from.
So if you're comfortable, would you be comfortable in us just striking the last sentence?
That's correct.
All right. So let's do that. Do we need a motion to change those minutes? Councilor Palmer, can you give me a recommendation?
Yeah, we can just, so that, who moved the motion?
You did, and Councilor Devlin
I did?
seconded. Yes.
Okay, yeah, so just as amended.
Okay. So we'll do that. So for the record, Ms. Delaselle will just put as amended and strike the last sentence from those minutes on that adoption of minutes 3A.
Thank you, your worship.
All right, thank you. Any other comment on those minutes? And so we're going to go back to adopting the minutes of March 12th as amended. Is that correct?
Correct.
Right. Someone want to make that motion for me then?
Yeah,
Councilor Palmer,
that's my motion.
that's your motion. Okay. And Councilor Devlin, you're seconding. All in favor? Motion's carried. Thank you. Adoption of the minutes of the special council meeting of March 14th. Someone want to make that motion for me? Councilor Cherry, Councilor Lucelle, all in favor? Motion's carried. Thank you. Moving on to business arising from the minutes of the regular council meeting of March 12th. Anything else regarding that business, Councilor Palmer?
Is there any update regarding the lobbying regarding the liquid waste management plan or for the wastewater?
I think we're still trying to put together meetings. Any comment, Mr. Parliament, or we're still in the works trying to put those?
Yeah,
together?
in short, we're still in the works, but we're close. We've had some positive responses. And Janet's been leading the charge, trying to nail down a date because the House is not in session. And so when you do meet the minister, most likely you'd be meeting the minister in their writing, which in the case of Minister Lang, that's Vancouver. In the case of Minister Popham, I believe it's somewhere on the island. So we've got a tentative week scheduled, just haven't nailed down the exact location yet. But it looks very promising.
Any other business arising from those minutes? Seeing none, any business arising from the special council meeting of March 14th? Seeing none, I'm going to move on to announcements from the mayor. So I just have a few announcements. So regarding the logo engagement, there's a pop-up tomorrow. The last pop-up will be at Southside tomorrow, and closing date is Sunday, March 31st. So if anyone wants to weigh in, give their vote on the 4 logos that are proposed, you have until Sunday to do that, and you can do that through Talk Revelstoke or with Miss Williams at Southside Market tomorrow. Zoning bylaw rewrite is underway. There's going to be some coffee chats starting April 8th. Is that correct date, Mr. Simon? So we want the community members to come out, give us the value of their opinion on the bylaw, weigh in as how it reflects with their property, and let staff know. And then we're having more water replacement projects going on starting in April of this year. We've had some work done on First Street last year, and it's carrying on with the remaining portion of the project, focusing on Rokeby Avenue to Mackenzie Avenue and the intersections to the north and south of Grizzly Plaza. So just so that people know that we have that project carrying on as well. All right, we have a delegation here this afternoon, members of the Okanagan Regional Library. Lucy and Danielle are here to make a presentation. Ladies, if you'd like to come up, we'd love to hear your presentation.
Thank you. First, I'm going to indulge in the most terrifying part of every presentation, which is setting up my equipment here. See if I can remember what I was just shown. This one? Yeah. Okay, we're on the right track. Did the magic happen? Yes.
Magic's happening.
Okay, the magic has happened. So first of all, thank you so much, Mayor and Council, for fitting us into your agenda. I know you have many other topics to cover today, so thank you for making time for us. My name is Danielle Hubbard. I'm the CEO of the Okanagan Regional Library. So Lucy and Lucy is the community librarian here in Revelstoke. I suspect all of you already know Lucy. So we're going to take about 10 minutes of your time. The purpose of this presentation is really for information for all of you and also by way of introduction, because I have only been the CEO for just over a year. So other than Councillor Palmer, who sits on the library board, I have yet to meet any of you. So again, by way of introduction, My goal is to get out and visit all of the member councils of the Okanagan Regional Library every year or two moving forward. So most hopefully you'll see me regularly from here on out. So the Okanagan Regional Library is one of the largest library systems in the province. We serve a population of over 400,000 people. We have 30 branches, about 300 staff, and we provide services to 4 regional districts. So in addition to Columbia Shuswap, we also serve North Okanagan, Central Okanagan, and Okanagan-Similkameen. So in just a moment, I'll show you a map of all of our branches. But of course, for you and for your population here in Revelstoke, most importantly, we're the Revelstoke Library. So Revelstoke is one of our branches, and if I do say so for myself, it's one of our busiest branches. And a lot of that has to do with Lucy and her team. So one of the initiatives that I have been very involved with since starting as CEO is leading the ORL through a new strategic planning process. So I think this describes many organizations, but the ORL's last strategic plan kind of lay fallow during the COVID years. So right now we're working on rebuilding who we are, what we want to be accomplishing over the next 5 years. And so our vision as an organization is to nurture a vital community space for learning, connecting, and exploring. And once we get to the final part of this presentation where Lucy shows some photos of activity in the Revelstoke branch, and for all those of you who use the Revelstoke Library, I think you know how well this vision is being delivered here in Revelstoke. So 4 of the big guiding pillars of the ORL strategic plan is to cultivate learning, literacy, creativity, and imagination. Many of the services that are most associated with public libraries fall under that. So we lend books, we offer ebooks, online resources, magazines, newspapers. We offer welcoming, inclusive space to gather and connect. So that can be very active in the form of story times and book clubs and writing groups and art groups, and can also be very neutral in the form of a space where people can come and spend time and pursue their own activities. And we embrace local heritage and culture. So again, up and down the interior of BC, we have 30 branches in 30 different communities. So what exactly that third point looks like in each of our locations is different because the heritage and culture throughout our service area differs community by community. The ORL also develops and nurtures community partnerships. So that also differs community to community, but we really see ourselves as an active participant in our community. And we also strive for organizational and service excellence. So in a very brief summary, the structure of the ORL is that we are ultimately governed by a board of 24 elected officials, which perhaps all of you are already aware of that. So right now, Councillor Palmer is the representative from Revelstoke. So he and 23 other elected officials are the governance body of the ORL. And then I, as CEO, report to the board. I meet with the board quarterly, and then the rest of the staff and the rest of the operations flow out from my position and my management team. So this is a map of our service area. So Revelstoke, of course, is one of our farthest north locations, but Golden is actually the farthest north and east location of the Okanagan Regional Library. And then we have branches in the Shuswaps. We have a branch in Scotch Creek that was destroyed during the fires last summer, so we're in the process of rebuilding that. And then we have branches all the way down south to Osoyoos and up into the Similkameen with Headley and Princeton. So it is a very expansive service area. And I think some of the benefits of being part of such a large system and such a large service area is that the resources that the Okanagan Regional Library are able to provide are beyond what would be available in any one community. So, sorry, I'm getting over a cold. I'm not contagious anymore. So across the system, we have a little under 600,000 physical materials. So again, that's what you more traditionally think of in a public library: books, magazines, newspapers, that kind of content. And we also have a very precise number of 144,650 digital materials. So that's ebooks, audiobooks, online research databases, music, movies. I would say both of these numbers are always shifting and expanding because we're always adding to our collections. And from any of our branches, I just showed the map of all of our branches, patrons, members of the public are able to request material from any location and return it to any location. So again, this is far more than any one community would be able to house if they were going it alone, as it were. So our central headquarters are in Kelowna. We're located in the suburbs of Kelowna. Kelowna is our largest population base. And so this is actually a picture of our headquarters building. If you're looking down from my office is kind of over here, and then this is looking down on where our collections are brought in and received and cataloged. And then we call it allocated. They're allocated out to all of our different branches. So we have a delivery van that is traveling up and down the valley all the time. And for some of our farther flung communities, such as Revelstoke and Golden, materials sometimes travel by mail as well to get here and back. And this is also the building where myself and the rest of the management team are located. Although, of course, we all spend a lot of time on the road to get out and connect with our staff and with our communities. So the underpinning financial framework for the Okanagan Regional Library, it's we are funded about 80 to 90% by municipal taxes, which is why I think it's very important and valuable that I come out and build connections with all of our member councils, because your taxpayers are providing about 80% of our operational funding. The other, about 15% comes from provincial funding, and then a little 5% or so sliver comes from donations and grants and things like that. But so from the municipal funding, which is most of our funding, the ORL levies the communities. So myself and my chief financial officer, we calculate those levies based on population and on land value. So if a community has a larger population, then of course the levy that comes into the ORL is higher. It would be about the same per person in your service area, but for the community as a whole, it's higher. And then we manage those resources with a system, our financial allocation model. So in a nutshell, the goal of that is that the management team takes in those levies and then we allocate them out to each community proportionately. So if Revelstoke is contributing X number of dollars to the Okanagan Regional Library, then we aim to put that amount of money back into the library services provided to Revelstoke, with the goal of ensuring that none of the communities are supporting other communities unduly. And one of the challenges that I perceive as a reality for the ORL is that all of our communities' populations are increasing. So I know that that's very much the case in Revelstoke, and that's the case in our other communities too. So we are finding that over the years, we have budgeted quite conservatively, and we're really trying not to overburden our member communities, which does mean that staff at the level of Lucy and her team are serving larger and larger communities without having more staff hours or more resources to deliver on that. So that's certainly a challenge for our system. So I'm gonna then pass it over to Lucy to talk about what's happening here in Revelstoke. And then if you have any questions after that, then we're happy to take them.
All right, okay. My disclaimer at the beginning of every public speaking engagement is I'm an introvert. I like books. I don't like talking to groups of people, however small and friendly. So, but I did want to take a couple of minutes first of all, to say, as a person who's worked for the ORL for 20 years, I can't believe how great management is right now. And we're very lucky.
I paid her to say that.
She in chocolate. Anyways, so, and then my next thing is I really want to thank everyone for bearing with us during our very long renovation process, which was painful for everybody and for the staff at the recreation center as well. And if I could put, very specific thank you out to Troy Biggs. He has been amazing. And also Adam Kidd, who worked very closely with our IT department to install our new desk and just generally very helpful. And guess what? Just pending some paperwork, we're in. So it's, yeah. Woo! So that's just really good news. Yeah, it's been a long haul. It's been very hard, but we've been really space challenged. We're super, super busy and we're squeezing people and we're constantly moving furniture, but we are providing service. 70,000 items checked out last year. Our circulation was up 4%. Okay, the stats are kind of boring, but and as you can see from the pictures, there's crazy stuff going on at all times. So it's really fun. When the strategic planning started at the ORL, we talked about how spread out we are and how maybe we should change the name of the ORL because we're not everybody's in the Okanagan. And I told Danielle, well, what about calling it the Super Happy Magic Library? So, and I think that I'm very grateful. I think my job is pretty magic. Yeah, it's not every day you get to have a giant dinosaur high-fiving preschoolers. And, we try to serve as broad a population as we can. So you can see our ukulele group there and the Revelstoke After School Society, some daycares that are having fun with the dinosaur. And cardboard construction. I know it sounds silly, but it's super fun. We threw 12 huge boxes in our lab on the weekend and gave the kids tools and they built amazing stuff. So it was very fun. And then just to move it forward so you can see one more. Yeah, we have a really great team. I cannot take credit for everything that happened at the library. It's not just all on me. And also Revelstoke as a community has been insanely supportive of us. We've had, for instance, our circulation desk was funded by a personal donor who wants to be anonymous. And there's been a lot of that going on. So we feel very appreciated. And also just very grateful for all our community connections. We work with many great partners. And we're looking forward to taking on more. But again, with the, just qualifying that, we are getting busier and busier all the time, doing more and more things. And sometimes it feels like we're skidding a little on the edge, like, whoa, how can we do all this? But so far so good. So that's it for me. And if you ever have any questions or you want to come visit the library, please come in. You want to have a nap? We have a brand new, beautiful couch that many people are enjoying reading on and napping on. And yeah, so anyways, come see me anytime. And thank you so much.
Thank you. Anything else that you need to add? Councilor Palmer, I'll let you go first.
Yeah, thank you very much. Thank you very much. Working with Danielle as the new CEO has been in the library board has been really amazing. She's doing an awesome job. Went through a review and that's, I think, very unanimous with the board members. It's a big board. But it's fun. You can imagine having 24 counselors, and so we have a good chair. Loyal from Kelowna is the chair, so he does a very good job. Thank you for the presentation, and great to see a really, really good PowerPoint. And just thank you. I'm a heavy library user, and so it's a lot of fun for me. It's probably one of the most fun community or committee that I've been on, and really enjoy. And I see Lucy quite a bit, and she does amazing. Just a couple of comments on our library. I do visit the other libraries from time to time, in our library. I visit a lot. It's a very, very busy place. And I was just having this discussion regarding users and the financial allocation. It's a tricky thing where the board is having to look at that, what's fair and how the money goes out. One of the challenges that we have is we have a really high usage of non-tax, non-residents that are using that from our visitors, whether they're doing businesses or a place to be warm, that live in a camper or whatever, and or finding a place. So it's a very, very busy place. I see it all the time, and I was talking a little bit about, is there ways that we can partner on allocation? It's great to have this little expansion, and yet it's still way undersized for the actual activity that happens in that community. And of that almost 600,000 physical materials, I think I've looked at about 100,000 of them. So,
You gotta pick up the pace, come on.
yeah, thank you very much.
Thank you.
So many other comments from council? I want to say thank you, Danielle and Lucy. I would love to come down and be able to do what some of the RCMP do, come and read to the kids and that sort of thing. So I would love that, and to be able to come down and high five the dinosaur would be great for me as well with the kids. Really appreciate the fact that you guide the young people in such a terrific way. They get to be themselves and enjoy themselves and get to learn at an early age about books and all kinds of things library-based that we didn't see in my generation. But now when I look at this sort of thing, and I look at these pictures, and every one of these kids and the volunteers have a smile on their face, and just really appreciate the things that they do and the creativity, throw out the gifts and give the kids a box and look what you get, right? It's pretty cool. So thank you for what you do for our community and being present. We
Thank you.
appreciate that so much.
And thank you so much for the support of council too.
Great. All right, thank you again.
Thank you.
Okay, we are now going to move on to item 8A, notice of motion policy C4. And so does someone want to do you have any presentation on this other than we're bringing it forward?
I do not, your worship.
All right, someone want to put the motion on the table for me, please? Councilor Palmer.
That the notice of motion policy C4 be brought to the next.
Okay.
Oh, sorry, I'm on the wrong page here. As written in the agenda.
Okay, seconder for the motion, please. Councilor Devlin. Any discussion on the motion? Councilor Orlando.
Sorry, Your Worship, the audio on my end cut out there a minute. I just wanted to double check here. This is, so we're hoping to pass this motion at this point, or this policy. I'm sorry, I'm just a bit off on procedure. And then following that, I just had one minor change I would like to suggest.
Okay, so yes, we're hoping to adopt this policy. Is that correct, Ms. Floyd?
That is correct, your worship. The recommendation from committee of the whole was to bring it to today's meeting with the amendments as council directed at committee of the whole on the 14th.
Okay, and then Councilor Orlando, you have another amendment?
Yeah, Your Worship, I'd like to suggest an amendment. It's not really substantial at all, but I think it makes sense to me. And that's item 7, to change the word from speech to presentation. So it talks about a 10-minute speech. I think maybe a 10-minute presentation is a bit more in line with helping people in the future interpret what the intent of the policy is.
Okay. You want to make that motion then? Councilor Palmer, do you want to speak to that first?
Yeah, so I think, Mike, because I put the motion on the table and it's maybe not super clear. So really that motion should read that, in taking into consideration Councilor Orlando's comments, that notice of motion policy C4 as
Adopted.
amended, as presented by the committee of the whole, with the minor change of presentation substituting speech be adopted.
Okay. Is that clear, Ms. Delaselle, for you?
Yes, thank you, your worship.
Okay, so seconder for that motion then?
So that's kind of like a friendly amendment.
Oh, friendly amendment. Okay, thank you. All right, Councilor Orlando, you're okay with that change?
Yes, Your Worship, thank you.
Any other comments from council? Saying none, I'll call a question. All those in favor? Opposed? No, motion's carried unanimously. Thank you. All right, moving on to item 9A, zoning text amendment bylaw 2378 and 2379. Mr. Simon, do you have a bit of a presentation on this?
Through your worship, yes, we do have a presentation if council would like to see it.
Yes, please.
Does not want to be working right now. Your worship, I'm not a tech person, so I just keep unplugging it and plugging it back in, thinking that it's going to work because it was just working a minute ago.
Murphy's Law. Eh?
Through your worship, if if Janet's able to bring it up on there, then I can speak to it from the screen.
We'll get to it.
Ms. Delaselle, can you bring up your, thank you.
Great backup.
Oh, thank you. I will just note whenever a slide change is needed.
Thank you.
So thank you, your worship. So today we have an application, which is a rezoning application. There's two bylaws that are being considered by council. The first one, bylaw 2378, is to actually create a new standard residential zone within the zoning bylaw. So this isn't a comprehensive development zone. This is a new standard residential zone. We'll get into that and do a little bit more detail. And then the second bylaw, 2379, that council is considering today is to rezone the subject property at 411 and 501 Simpson Street from the current R2A zone, special low density residential district, to this new zone that we're calling the R6 zone, the multi-unit row house zone. So next slide, Janet. We're gonna go over the background of the subject property, get into the proposal overview, get into the policy direction and staff evaluation, and then conclude with the staff recommendation and council options. Next slide, please. So the subject property, as indicated, is currently zoned R2A. You see there's an aerial image on the property here, or on the slide here. It's located off Simpson Street. Property is about 2,800 square meters in size, so about 0.7 of an acre, and that's both lots combined, not individually. So both lots combined are about 0.7 acres. Currently developed with a single detached dwelling on each lot. They would need to be demolished in order to accommodate the proposed development. Lands are surrounded by residential development to the north, east, and west, with the Greenbelt and Illecillewaet River to the south on the other side of Simpson Street. Next slide, please. So as indicated, two bylaws are being considered by council. So the first bylaw we're considering, 2378, is the establishment of this new residential zone. Now, council, keep in mind, this is a new residential zone that other properties could apply to. It's not a CD zone, that's property specific, a new standard residential zone. The new zone would allow for row house dwellings as a permitted use, and they would need to be arranged side by side, so vertical party wall between each row house dwelling unit, and there would be no more than 4 row house dwellings permitted per block of building. Now, this is principal dwelling units, not secondary dwelling units, so you'd be permitted to have a maximum of 4 row house dwellings with 4 secondary suites within each block of housing. Secondary suites are permitted in the zone, maximum building height of 10 meters. which is the same as the maximum building height within the current R2 zone and as well as our other single family zones like R1. So no increase in building height compared to what's already existing on site. And maximum lot coverage within this zone is proposed at 60%. And there would be a requirement for somewhere between 10 and 20 square meters of usable open space associated with each principal dwelling unit. Now it varies between 10 and 20 because it's based on the number of bedrooms that are contained within each dwelling unit. So this can be things like balconies, decks, usable open space in the backyard. It could be a whole host of things, and it provides flexibility for the developer while making sure we have some usable open space dedicated to each principal dwelling unit. Next slide, please. So one of the things council is going to notice in this zone, and this is a really good precursor for our comprehensive zoning bylaw review that we're doing. Right now, the way we regulate density is all based on the amount of units you can put on a piece of land. So we call that units per hectare. So right now we have our zones vary typically between 30 and 60 units per hectare. So it's exactly as it sounds. You have a 1 hectare property, you can put 60 units on there. You got half a hectare property, you can put 30 units on there if your maximum density is 60 units per hectare. Makes sense. So we're proposing a different way to regulate density within this zone. And you'll see this as a common theme as part of the zoning bylaw rewrite in all of our multi-unit zones. We're recommending that we regulate density based on what we call floor area ratio. Floor area ratio is the total area of all the buildings on a lot divided by the area of a lot. So breaking this down a little bit more, looking at the diagram here, this shows you what a floor area ratio of 1.0 looks like. So you can imagine it with 100% of the lot covered, you can build a 1-story building across the whole lot at a floor area ratio of 1.0. With 50% of the lot covered, you could build a 2-story building. With 25% of the lot covered, you could build a 4-story building, and so on. When we regulate density this way, it has the effect of incentivizing the developers on the market housing side to build a larger quantity of smaller units, which is in line with our official community plan, our housing action plan. This is because the density parameters don't say you can only have X amount of units on a lot. When you do it that way, you say you can have 10 units on this lot. The developers are going to say, we're going to build those 10 units as high quality as we can to maximize our rate of return. Why would you not? That makes sense. Regulating density this way, you want to maximize your return by having the most units that you can get on site, maximizing the density. The things that would then restrict the number of units on site, parking regulations, usable open space, building height, lot coverage, etc. So does that seem to make sense, the way we're proposing regulating density within the zone? Next slide, please. So the applicant has prepared a site plan in support of their application. Now, keep in mind, we are at rezoning stage. So it is conceptual. The applicant has the intent on moving forward with their site plan as proposed. But again, what we're considering at rezoning stage is use and density. When we get to development permit stage, that's when you're going to see a more flushed out site plan, looking at building orientation, building siting, setbacks, usable open space, parking, access, all that good stuff. What we're really concerned with today is use and density. Is the use row home appropriate for this area? And is the density of 1.2 floor area ratio as proposed within the zone, which equates to about 18 units on site for principal dwelling units, is that appropriate for this site? So again, at future DP stage, we're going to be looking at form and character of the buildings, building siting, building height, access, parking, snow management, landscaping, usable open space. Now, one thing, because it always comes up at rezoning stage, even though it is more of a development permit consideration that I think is really important for council to take note of today, is parking. Parking is always the elephant in the room that comes up. And with this zone, because the applicant has worked with staff to propose this as a standard residential zone rather than a CD zone, if it was a CD zone, you'd probably see parking embedded right within the zone. It is very likely that at development permit stage, you're going to see a variance requested for parking. Right now, the minimum parking requirements in the bylaw is 2 stalls per unit for a row house. For an apartment building, even if it's a 3 or 4 bedroom apartment unit, it's 1.5 stalls. We're probably going to be moving forward with the zoning bylaw rewrite on that 1.5 stall minimum requirement. Doesn't really make sense to have a difference between a row house and an apartment building for minimum parking requirements. And we all know that our parking requirements are quite high right now. So we do got to re-examine those. But I just want to give council kind of that heads up that you probably are going to see a variance. And the applicant could have proposed this as a CD zone. They did work with staff again to embed it as a standard residential zone, which means our standard parking requirements as they currently exist in the zoning bylaw will apply to this development. Now, all this might be moot within a year, should council support the new zoning bylaw, but it is where we are right now. We are working with a antiquated, bit of a broken zoning bylaw, to be honest. So, policy direction and staff evaluation. So staff obviously have reviewed the rezoning proposal in accordance with the official community plan. So specifically, we look at the housing policies in section 4.2 of the OCP. Oh, sorry, Janet, next slide. I moved it on here, but it didn't move on there. So it complies with section 4.2, all the housing policies, and the real key there is incentivizing the development of multi-unit residential on smaller lots, smaller units, secondary suites being incorporated into the proposals to promote some form of attainable home ownership on the market housing side. Complies with the policies contained in section 4.5, which are specific to the Southside neighborhood. Southside, if you recall, when we did the OCP in 2022, was noted as our most viable neighborhood to support infill development. It's fully serviced. We have water mains, sewer mains. It has access to local and arterial roadways. There's access to amenities at the Southside Market. It was identified as our most prime neighborhood to support infill development of this nature. So that's what the neighborhood policies say. And then lastly, it does align with the land use designation policies. So it does hold the low density residential land use designation within the official community plan. What that designation says is we support row house developments of small blocks, integrating with adjacent single family, triplexes, and fourplexes. So this proposal does align with the land use that is assigned to it within the OCP. So staff recommendation today, we are recommending, thank you, Janet, right on the ball there. We are recommending that the zoning amendment bylaw 2378 be read a first, second, third time and be adopted. And again, that is for the establishment of the new R6 zone.
Right.
And then bylaw 2379, which is to rezone the subject property from R2 to the new R6 zone. We're recommending first, second, and third reading. And then as a condition of third reading, that the applicant prepare a stormwater management plan. That was the one item that in review of the application that we did want to see prior to adoption of the bylaw. There's a couple other items. We're looking for a trip generation assessment at development permit stage. So that would happen as we continue to move through the process. But a stormwater management plan is what was identified by the engineering team to be required before adoption of the zoning bylaw. So any questions, staff are happy to answer. The next slide, Janet, you will see alternative council options. So there's a few different options in here for council. First one would be if council wants to see changes to the zone. You don't like the height set at 10 meters, you don't like the setbacks are set at 5 meters, 1.5 meters, you can direct those changes to staff. We will work with the proponent to make the necessary changes. Another option would be for council if you want to direct a public information meeting. Keep in mind, changes to provincial legislation, we are restricted from holding a public hearing on residential rezoning applications that align with the OCP. So even if we wanted to hold a public hearing, we are not able to. But one of the options that council has within the procedures bylaw you adopted last July is to direct a developer-led public information meeting. And then lastly, council as always has the option to deny the proposed amending bylaws. So thank you. Any questions, staff are happy to answer.
Great, thank you, Mr. Simon. My first question in dealing with the zoning amendment bylaw. So as we move through our comprehensive zoning rewrite, the R6 designation will be put in as you rewrite things. Is that correct?
Through your worship, that is correct. So I will note that the applicant was very amicable in working with staff. So we're in this weird place right now where we have this comprehensive zoning bylaw rewrite being done. And for those of you that have dabbled with it that we sent out last Friday, all the names of the zones have changed. The development regulations within the zones have changed. And what this R6 zone is the equivalent of what will be the new RLD3 zone. So should council support this new zone in the bylaw, it's almost just giving it a little bit advanced placement within the current zoning bylaw that would then carry forward into the new zoning bylaw should council adopt that one in the fall.
Correct. Okay. So when we deal with these bylaws, the new bylaws, as it's going to come forward, we're actually ahead of the game and we're putting things in place that our provincial government is mandating us to do as we move forward with the number of units per lot. And this allows us a bit of option and brings us into that ability to put a little more density into our lots in a comprehensive way. Okay, thank you for that. Any comments from council? Just let's deal with the zoning bylaw first. Councilor Palmer.
A few questions, Mayor Solis, to the planner. So first question, as far as the zoning change, did that go through APC?
Through Councilor Palmer, yes, it did go to APC. You'll note in the others consulted section of the report that the APC resolution is in there.
Okay. Yes, I sort of recall that. Was there any, aside from the resolution, sort of a sense of what APC was saying?
Through your worship, Councilor Palmer, if I may, it was a little bit divided. There was a couple individuals on APC that had some concerns more so with proliferation of this type of zoning if it were to occur next to each other. So if you had three of them lined up and you had multiple developments like this off of the same street. Some of the other concerns that were raised were more so development permit items. So looking at shadow impacts, spacing between buildings, so building siting, et cetera, which we would be doing a full review at development permit stage, and that development permit would go back to the APC. I'll note that we have spoken to the applicant who has indicated that they've already taken those comments from APC and they are incorporating them into their work that they're doing to prepare for a potential development permit submission, should they be successful with their rezoning application.
Thank you. Yeah, a bit more. And actually, I'm just going to back up a little bit. Just thank you to the planner for a clear presentation. There's quite a bit of stuff in there, and so thank you for being focused on the items and being open sort of to the creativity of finding solutions, not just for this development, but for our housing needs and taking into consideration zoning. So very, very much appreciated. So through the mayor, do you know offhand the size of the property? And that might be in the report.
Through your worship, both lots combined are about 2,800 square meters, so about 0.7 of an acre.
0.7 of an acre in hectares, sorry.
Through your worship, I believe that would equate to about 0.3 hectares roughly, with the 18 principal dwelling units on there. If we did calculate density on a unit per hectare basis, it would be at 63 units per hectare.
Right, yes. Okay, and then again, through the mayor, so some of this was coming from your presentation, some thoughts, but or questions I had. If those properties, and you may not be able to answer this right away, but if those properties were amalgamated and then subdivided into the smallest parcel size, how many parcels theoretically could that be subdivided into?
So through your worship, we have random numbers. So right now, minimum lot size is 500 square meters within that zone. They need about 360 square meters to accommodate the internal roadway. So if they did a bare land strata, they could create 5 lots under current zoning right now. Each of those lots could contain a duplex with suites. So you'd be looking at 10 principal units with 10 secondary suite units. And all that would take is a subdivision application that doesn't require any rezoning, no public engagement. So we're really looking at the difference between 18 row houses with 18 suites or 10 duplexes with 10 suites. And I'll note that with the zoning bylaw comprehensive rewrite, you'll see in the draft new zones, this would be getting what we call the RLD1 zone. And we'd be recommending that lot size go down to 400 square meters, again, to promote more infill and sensitive development. So they'd be able to get 24 duplex units and secondary suites on there, should council be supportive of those parameters as part of the zoning bylaw rewrite.
Yeah, and thank you, Mayor Sills. And just sort of on that's sort of getting more into the second question of that. So just going back to the main issue, not the main issue, the issue about the rezoning, the changes to the zoning bylaw, not for that particular property. The questions on that is, so this floor area ratio, and what I'm wondering is, it's potentially a fairly substantial change to our community. I'm very, very much in favor of getting away. In fact, that from the CD zones, I think that's been inappropriate and we've created a problem there. So I really like the ideas. I'm just wondering about, unintended consequences of that. one of the intended consequences is higher density. And we know that, and some people are going to be opposed to that. I recognize that, but that is foreseeable, and it's the stuff that we don't see. And so this is an interesting exercise of doing it on one lot as a sort of a trial, if you wish. What I'm wondering is what discussion at the professional level, like peer reviews or consultant involvement in sort of understanding this new animal.
Your Worship, Councillor Palmer, within the planning profession, when we look at regulating multi-unit development, everything is shifting to floor area ratio now. We've known for a long time now, when you regulate it based on units per hectare, you're capping the maximum amount of units that you're going to see on that site. The developer is then incentivized to make those units as expensive as they can be. And it's really contrary to what our housing goals are within the OCP and Housing Action Plan. And I totally understand it's a different way to regulate it that this community might not be used to, but it is the most opportune path forward, because you got to regulate the number of units through other parameters, parking regulations that are effective but fair, usable open space, and the other two key ones that come along with floor area ratio is maximum building height, because you don't want to leave it open without a maximum building height. You still want to be controlling that building form, as well as lot coverage. Lot coverage becomes quite critically important. So floor area ratio, lot coverage, and building height all work together to really delineate that three-dimensional building envelope that's permitted on property. And there's a big question in the planning profession right now where, what are we regulating? Are we regulating that three-dimensional building envelope, and then what happens inside the building? Why do we care so much about that as long as they comply with parking, usable open space, all the other good parameters that we put in our zoning bylaws? So that's why there's this big push to go towards thoughtful floor area ratio density requirements, and it gives more flexibility for the development community, and it incentivizes a larger quantity of smaller units, which is a way for us to promote affordability or attainability on the market housing side, where we don't have a lot of tools right now.
Good. That's it for that part.
For that
Yeah.
part.
Yeah.
Any other comments on the bylaw? Councillor Staples.
Yeah, thank you, Your Worship. Through the chair to Mr. Simon, I have a question in regards to, like, I understand the applicant, I understand what we're looking to do. For me, it's more of a question of how we're engaging with the public and getting the public feedback, because it's my impression, and correct me if I'm mistaken, but so earlier conversation, we said that the zoning bylaw rewrite was going to begin, kind of like the public engagement was going to begin April 8th. So we're about 2 weeks early from that public engagement. We've gotten a lot of feedback from the 100-meter impact of this site from a lot of the residents. We've gotten some feedback from the advisory planning committee, which is included in our notes, and take that for what it is. So, you know, and I remember, like, when we first started sitting around the council table, you know, Councillor Palmer was really big on the process. So, you know, maybe I'm a little bit confused as to, like, what's the process moving forward, because it almost seems like this approving of the R6 or the zoning bylaw today, 2378, if I'm remembering my numbers correctly, is almost premature from the public engagement component of what we're aiming to do with everything else. Am I correct in?
Comment, Mr. Simon.
Through your worship, Councillor Stapener. So the proposal to not have this as a CD zone and to embed it as a standard residential zone was ultimately staff requesting that from the applicant, and the applicant working with us under that guise. And the intent is, we could have had this as a CD zone. The amount of time that staff have spent with the zoning bylaw comprehensive rewrite untangling these old CD zones to embed them as new standard zones within our bylaw has been quite an undertaking. So we don't want to make the same mistakes from the past. And if we had all these viable zones that we've now drafted as part of this comprehensive zoning bylaw rewrite, why not utilize those zones rather than recreating the wheel? If this is the route that we are going to be recommending going, then let's do it. And there still is opportunities. So we had to advertise for first notice in the newspaper, hence the letters that had come in. There is a development notice sign that is put up on the property. And again, council, you guys adopted the development approval procedures bylaw update in July 2023. So there is the option to request that the developer host a public information meeting as well if we are looking for other forms of engagement. I see this as a very standard benign zone in our zoning bylaw. It should be a standard zone. We should have had this a decade and a half ago. And if we would have had stuff like this in our bylaw, we might not be in the housing crunch that we're in right now. So I don't see a major concern with having it done in advance of the zoning bylaw rewrite, because the alternative option is a comprehensive development zone. Because all of our zones in the zoning bylaw right now don't work to facilitate this form of development. And we don't want any more CD zones. The OCP has policy direction that's very clear: discourage the development of CD zones unless they're absolutely needed. And for staff, again, we have spent dozens of hours untangling the existing CD zones as part of our comprehensive rewrite. So there's no need to add another one into the mix that would then just get lumped into a new standard zone upon completion of the zoning bylaw rewrite. Does that make sense? We have a lot of moving pieces right now. I can appreciate that.
Maybe if you could just kind of touch on I'm sorry, through the chair to Mr. Simon, if I may. Maybe you could just touch on like what benefit and what detriment would be if we went with option 2, which is kind of the public engagement component of this aspect.
Through your worship to Councillor Stapenhurst, the benefit and the implications with option 2. Well, the benefit would be the community would be able to come out and become informed on the value of this type of development and why staff are recommending approval of it, why we are recommending embedding this as a standard zone. They'd be able to speak with the developer and raise any concerns that they have that may or may not result in changes, especially when we get to development permit stage. There's some concerns over building siting, etc. The implications associated with option 2 is just more delays and a longer approval process for the potential rezoning application should it be supported by council.
Any other comments, Councillor Cherry, then Councillor Lucia?
Thank you, Worship. I just wanted to add to what Mr. Simon said, that this complies with the OCP. This is what I believe 1,100 hours of community involvement on that document that was just recently updated. I think the community had ample opportunities to weigh in on all of this already.
Councillor Lucia?
Thanks, Marshals. Question 3 to staff. This zone would be low density. And what would be the difference between medium and a high density?
Through your worship, Councillor Lucio. So we're following the density parameters as outlined in the updated official community plan. So the OCP identifies low density as ground oriented development. So you can think of it where you just have access at grade essentially, maybe a few steps to get up, but not an apartment building. So it'd be single family duplexes, so 2-unit dwellings, row house dwellings that are in small blocks. So maybe 4, maybe 5 row house units per block, as well as triplexes and fourplexes. When we start getting into the larger blocks of row homes, maybe 8 dwelling units where they're a little bit taller as well, and getting into the 4-story apartment buildings, that's when we're moving into medium density. And once we start getting above 4-story apartment buildings, that's when we're getting into high density.
Okay, thank you. Another question for staff. With this proposal being having a stratified road, their parking requirements would all be on their property. So if there were individuals parked on the road, would bylaw be able to ticket those people?
Through your worship, depending on their compliance with the yearly parking regulations that we have. So Mr. Gibbs is here who can speak to it a little bit more than me, but it all depends on what the parking regulations are for that particular area.
Okay. Do you, so I have Councillor Orlando, then Councillor Palmer. Councillor Orlando.
Your worship, thank you. Just a confirmation, is my sound okay?
Yes, it is. Thank you.
Great. Thank you. A few questions for staff. Thank you for putting together the presentation. As far as my understanding is zoning amendment bylaw 2378 and 2379 are very different in that 2378 applies generally to introduction of a new zone, whereas 2379 is specific to bringing this particular applicant within the zone. My focus is on 2378. Essentially, we, on Friday started a mail out regarding the comprehensive zoning change. This being one of the proposals within that zoning change, that process, which does require public hearings, and to bring the zoning bylaw into adoption is scheduled to complete in November. My question is this: this seems to me, work by staff to be accommodating to applicants in the interim period before we have this zoning in place. My concern is that this is going to be the first of several of them, and that this could potentially be deleterious to the orderly adoption of the comprehensive zoning bylaw. So my question is of staff is, will you entertain other similar applications in the coming months to allow other applicants to bring forth their applications and on a case-by-case basis adopt various zones going forward?
Simon?
Through your worship, Councillor Orlando, it is dependent on the nature of development that is being proposed. What we're trying to avoid here is the creation of more comprehensive development zones. We had 22 of them within the bylaw currently. We have gotten rid of 10 of them as part of the zoning bylaw rewrite that's in draft form right now. If we have applicants coming to the table proposing to rezone to a comprehensive development zone that 8 months from now, should council support the new zoning bylaw, would just be wrapped up into one of our new draft zones. We would rather see council consider those new draft zones earlier on a case-by-case basis to make a decision on individual rezoning applications, rather than go through, quite frankly, the administrative nightmare of working to establish new comprehensive development zones that will then just be folded into the new standard zones once this bylaw update is done. It's moving pieces right now, and this is what happens when we're doing these really large-scale community planning projects, where you can think of it in essence, we're taking out every single zone as it currently exists in the bylaw and then replacing it and updating our zoning map. So when we do that, we still have applications that are in the queue that we need to process. And from staff's perspective, this is a much more efficient way to be processing those applications rather than creating needless comprehensive development zones, which is discouraged within the policies of the OCP.
Okay, appreciate the comment. Follow up, Councillor Orlando.
Your worship, thank you. Yes, I do have a follow-up, and by way of feedback, I understand that comprehensive development zones aren't the way to go, and generally when you see a community that has a whole bunch of them like we do, that's a sign of planning needing to be updated. However, in my view, the contrast is not between a comprehensive development zone or no comprehensive development zone. The contrast is between approving development under the existing zoning bylaws or waiting until this one is complete. I have been an advocate for as long as I can remember, very publicly as much as possible, for zoning bylaw revitalization. And one of the things that has held it up is comprehensive development zones and the staff time it's taken to get these things through. However, I see also a similar parallel here, in that if we are going to be entertaining a number of different applications in different zones and adopting first, second, third reading, final adoption in 1 minute of these major changes, I feel that number one, that's going to take staff time off of getting to the finish line on our comprehensive zoning rewrite. And number two, it will have an undermining effect of that process, because community members may feel that under the zoning bylaw rewrite, I had the ability to comment and attend public hearings and provide comments at public hearings for the overall zoning rewrite, not individual housing applications, but the overall one, to see it accords with what I would like to see in my community or what I think is right. So that is my concern here for this one. Another further question is regarding the 2378 zoning bylaw. The question for staff is this. It contains a number of figures, maximum heights and et cetera, as one expects, setbacks, that kind of thing. if those were changed during for this zone or other zones during other zones that may also see interim applications that require the creation of or adoption of a new zone as proposed under the bylaw prior to the bylaw being adopted. This is the overall zoning amendment bylaw to be zoning bylaws to be adopted. What will happen then? For example, if the heights are changed, or if the density have changed, or if, for example, we have the community rejecting a certain zoning within their neighborhood and asking for something else, will this just be approved under the zoning, this particular zone, or will that affect future applications? I'm seeking to understand how that would work.
Mr. Simon, do you have understanding of the question?
Your worship, Councillor Orlando, if I'm understanding correctly, you're asking, should there be changes to, so should council adopt the zone as proposed today?
Mm-hmm.
And there are changes through the comprehensive zoning bylaw rewrite to that specific zone, what would the implications be for development on said property?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
So through your worship, Councillor Orlando, it would be totally dependent on what the nature of the changes are and what stage the applicant is at in the construction process. So for example, let's say we have a new zoning bylaw that's adopted by council December of this year or March of next year, and at the time that it's adopted, the building height has changed from 10 meters to 9 meters. If the applicant doesn't have an issued development permit, then they would need to abide by the updated provisions within the zoning bylaw. So it's totally dependent again on what the nature of the changes are and what stage the applicant is at in the approval process. So it's hard to give a cut and dry clear answer on that because there's a couple of variables there that we would need to understand specifically.
Councilor Palmer, you want to weigh in?
Yeah, so I have one question and then a few comments and then a possibility of a resolution. So my one question, before I ask the question, the comment, my general comment, we're dealing with two bylaws here, zoning bylaws. And it appears to me one is dependent on the first one being adopted. That will be my question. But I think we need to be really clear on these issues, and I'm trying to disentangle those two things. And hypothetical questions for other rezoning things in the future. There's too many permutations to go there. So my question is, just so that's clear in my mind, is bylaw number 2379 dependent on bylaw 2378 being adopted?
Through your worship, yes, that is correct. That's why we would recommend that 2378 is adopted prior to 2379 being adopted, should council support it.
So my comment, a couple comments is, and that's why I'm having to, so there's this change of our zoning in anticipation to the major rewrite. We're working on that. And I'm supportive of this idea of the stepping stone, if it's helping us with our housing needs and those kind of things. I'm supportive of considering it and possibly adopting that. Yes, ideally we'd have the whole rezoning thing is, but then we would, if we're going to wait for that, we'll just perpetuate housing issues. I'm trying to separate Simpson Road from that because this is a separate thing for the broader community.
Right.
And so a couple comments is I would like to really focus on just 2378 at this point. Possibly in hindsight, maybe it was two separate reports, but that doesn't really matter. 2378. And in my comments on that is this is about our future. This isn't this development. Yes, this development is, as proposed, needs this change, but they shouldn't be carrying the weight of that, for example, in a public information meeting. This is a decision that council, looking at the community and whatever aspects of that. So I definitely would not be supportive of a developer-driven public information session on 2378 because that is about a broader community. And if we do that, it'll be hyper-focused on Simpson Road, forgetting what's the broader need. So those are my comments. So with that, in order to get focus on 2378, the dialogue, and this is not making any final decisions, but I move that zoning amendment bylaw number 2378 be read a first time. So that's my motion, and the purpose is to get the dialogue focused on that particular issue.
Great. Second for that motion, Councillor Cherry. Do you want to speak to the motion?
Yes, please. Thank you very much to the planning staff for leading this and trying to help with some of the housing issues, accelerating that component of the rezoning bylaw. I certainly have a couple sort of these questions which I've asked already. However, here's a little piece. So it is a nice little piece rather than the entire zoning thing. So it's kind of nice from that perspective. So I'm definitely supportive of this being read the first time. Absolutely. And now the question that I'll be having, I'm assuming that this gets adopted, is what about the public engagement piece? So this applies to Simpson Road, but I'm going to just focus on this. One of the problems in the past, if we went back 5-6 years ago, we would be required to do a public hearing on this zoning amendment. During the pandemic years, which there was an evaporation of public accountability under the, I would suggest, the disguise of a pandemic, there wasn't this public accountability, but the province made a decision to say this is optional now for you. And then in this past year, they've gone and taken what was mandatory by the province and doesn't even allow us to have a public hearing. And so that is disturbing to me because this is important for our community. And I think it absolutely warrants a public hearing, but the province has said you can't do that. So if there was I think a public engagement might, I'm not saying absolutely be appropriate, but it should not be developer driven. So just on the merits of this particular bylaw for going ahead, I am supportive of the first reading. I think I would be supportive of the second and third reading today because it's helping us along the path of the zoning rewrite. And if it's not a point of order, are these?
No.
Yeah, okay.
Go ahead.
Yeah, the zoning is helping us on that path and understanding a little morsel of that. It's helping us with our housing issues that's a major priority for this council, of helping a variety of things on housing. How do we get higher density? And yes, I know a lot of people don't want higher density in their neighborhood. I wouldn't be happy next door to my place either, but we're changing as a community. So it is giving that indication. I'm supportive of helping market housing. It's a piece of the pie that we haven't paid a lot of attention to. So in those kind of concepts, and finally, and very importantly, that comprehensive development zone, I will not support a comprehensive development zone. I'll speak very strongly against it because it's a wrong tool and we don't need to make a continued mess. So those are my points. So on the first reading, and I don't know if there's any other sort of comments, but I'm absolutely supportive.
Councillor Cherry, you want to weigh in?
Thanks, Your Worship. Through the chair, Mr. Simon, can you inform council of when we have to have specific items in our zoning bylaw adopted as per provincial legislation?
Your Worship, Councillor Cherry, we need to align with Bill 44, which is a minimum of 4 units per lot by June 30th. Staff are working on amendments that we hope to bring forward for initial council consideration by the end of April.
And a follow-up, we won't have the opportunity to have a public engagement session. This is something we're mandated to do, and that's going to be zone, if I'm looking at, is that going to be a new RLD1?
through your worship to Councillor Cherry, how staff are going to be recommending to address Bill 44. And I don't want to go down so much of a rabbit hole with this because it is a bit separate, but I think it's important to note the first round of amendments that staff will be recommending is basically the least invasive way to comply with the legislation. Duplex with suites being permitted in every zone. We will then, as part of the zoning bylaw comprehensive rewrite, be having more conversations, the coffee chats are the first piece to it, with the community about is there a more creative or flexible way to accommodate 4 units per lot that doesn't just take the form of a duplex with suites? Could be 2 duplexes or a 4-plex or a triplex and a garden suite. We want to have that conversation with the community, but we'll be recommending baseline amendments in the least invasive way, just to get it out of the way, to say we align with the legislation, and then move forward with more thoughtful community engagement to figure out, do we want to take it one step further? Does that make sense?
It does, and thank you for that. And the reason I wanted to bring that up is we're gonna have to, we're gonna be approving some of the zoning bylaw anyways, because we're forced to. So I just want to make sure everybody at council knew that as well.
Yeah, appreciate that. Councillor Orlando.
Your worship, thank you. Just a follow-up question and genuine question, and it's based on Councillor Palmer's comments. The provincial government, as we are aware, is moving towards new legislation that prohibits public hearings regarding individual applications. But the zoning amendment 2378 that we're discussing right now is part of the zoning bylaw overhaul, which is subject to public hearing requirements. And I'm trying to rectify those two here in the sense that is it that it is individual applications, or is it that any zoning changes that are being made have a prohibition on that? And if that is the latter is the case, then how do we square the fact that the entire process that's scheduled to wrap up in November is subject to hearings?
Mr. Simon, comment on that, please.
Through your worship, Councillor Orlando, one thing to keep in mind is we are in this position of major monumental changes in the provincial legislative landscape. So we are still navigating that. There is still information coming out to us. And it also is something that all the answers to everything haven't been flushed out. In BC, the way things get flushed out, unfortunately, is through legal precedent. And it's going to be a decade of legal challenges and precedent being established to fully understand the implications of the changing provincial legislation. But essentially, our understanding of the legislation right now is residential applications that are consistent with the OCP are prohibited from public hearings being held. So bylaw 2378, one could certainly make the argument that it is a residential application that does comply with our official community plan, and therefore we are prohibited from holding a public hearing. Now, for the whole zoning bylaw overhaul that we're doing, that impacts institutional zoning, industrial, commercial, mixed use, residential. So I would 100% say it's fair game to hold a public hearing for something of that nature. But when we're looking at bylaw 2378, it gets a little bit more murky, which I know is not an ideal situation for council right now.
Follow up, Councillor Orlando.
Your worship, yes, thank you. And thanks to staff for answering the question. My thought at this point is I'm really concerned. Because 2379, fine, that's an individual application, but what we are essentially saying by allowing an application under 2379 to dictate the changes that we make and make an argument that there is no provision for allowing is that we have one individual application setting parameters for entire zones across the city without any permissible public input, whereas if this were not the case, the entire process is subject to public hearing and public input. I think we might be making a very big mistake and shooting ourselves in the foot here. Because the way I read this is if we move ahead with first, second, third reading and all the way through the 6 items on the council agenda here, there's nothing preventing everyone from jumping in the queue ahead of final completion of our zoning bylaw rewrite, getting their application in and demanding that changes be made according to their agenda. And it does not make any sense to me. And just in the same way that comprehensive development zones, which I don't support, and I agree with Councillor Palmer on that, are consumptive of time, this also creates a situation where everybody is going to be rushing in to get in before the finish line here to get their application in and get going. The point of redoing the bylaw and all the work that the community has put in the OCP as well as the zoning bylaw rewrite is to present a level playing field where there is equal opportunity for everyone to develop the property and make changes. This is introducing a whole new ad hoc system that will, I think, lead to the delay. Likely it will become something of staff resources. And, finally, from a communications perspective, people generally, in my opinion, don't pay attention to general changes, general rewrite changes. What they do pay attention to is something that impacts them directly. And what the message we are sending for people who have written in of concern about this is we are not really fully engaged in, this zoning bylaw rewrite right now. We are going to shut you out with first, second, third reading and adoption and just go ahead with this. Even though if we wait, you would have an opportunity to provide general input. I feel that we could really shoot ourselves in the foot for the entire zoning bylaw rewrite if we end up on this ad hoc basis and be doing it this way. It's really quite concerning to me, and I generally am not supportive of doing it this way out of just genuine, legit concern that we could be really going down the wrong path and leading to something that is damaging of our entire zoning bylaw project, which has been years in the making, starting with the OCP.
Great, thanks for your comment. Councillor Palmer, you want to weigh in before I speak?
Yeah, so just in response to Councillor Orlando Marisol's some valid points, some things I agree with, some I disagree with. So as I mentioned on moving this motion for 2378, I needed to totally separate Simpson Road from the discussion. So on that point, if Simpson Road specifically was the driver of this bylaw, I would not be supportive, much in a similar theme of what I'm understanding from Councillor Orlando. So I really need to totally separate the merits of Simpson Road. I do appreciate the planning department through the process looking for opportunities for synergies for moving ahead, and that's how I view this. So specifically, where I would agree, or components of agreement with Councillor Orlando, is that 2378, this discussion should be on the merits of 2378 and is this good for the community or not? And that's really important for me. Because it's leading to the major rewrite. So I'm keeping this like super separate in my mind. The concerns about opening up a can of worms or whatever, of all these other things, those are, again, I would suggest, I don't think there's any risk of the major rewrite sort of moving ahead. I have confidence in staff with our CAO to be, when there's some unusual thing coming up, is this the time or not the time? And I think that's what I'm interpreting is they said, this is okay, this makes sense. And we're going to avoid some other, because the developer could have forced a comprehensive development. So again, separating that, the question is this good for the community? What I'm sensing at this point is that it is good for the community. From what I know at this point, I would be, definitely supportive of first reading. If councils want to entertain a public information session driven by the city, not the developer, to keep the separation, I can certainly have that discussion. I don't think I would be in favor of adopting that resolution. I think we need that couple of weeks of, if we get to first, second, and third reading, that we need that a minimum of that pause before moving ahead, which would mean leaving Simpson Road for another at least a couple of weeks. So those are my comments.
Good, yeah, appreciate that. So I look at this and go, this text amendment bylaw 2378 was driven by staff to avoid going into a comprehensive bylaw for 2379. So they're able to look at this and go, what's going to be the best as we move forward so that we're going to see a comprehensive rewrite of the entire zoning bylaw. This works. They're taking into consideration what the provincial government is saying to us as far as mandating number of units, square footage, that sort of thing. And I look at this and go, this is a great way of change to build community. This is a way of adding density where now we're going to see community driven. So you said you would be comfortable in something 2379 in your neighborhood. I would be. And so I'm looking at that sort of thing. There's lots in my neighborhood that are going to be redeveloped, and I'm assuming they'll be redeveloped in some similar way. And I look at it as that's bringing community, that's bringing people back to our community. Parking is going to be addressed, all that sort of thing. But going back to 2378, I'm comfortable with what staff have provided here, and I'm comfortable in saying they've done some prudent choices, they've given some thought to it, and I would support it all the way through. However, depending on what you as a group around the table want to do, let's at least start the process, move this forward. So any other comments from any of council regarding zoning bylaw or text amendment 2378? I'll call a question on the first reading. We have a mover and a seconder, is that correct? Yes. All right. All those in favor? Opposed? No, motion's carried unanimously. Is there an appetite to putting this on for second and third reading as in your package? Someone want to make that motion? Councillor Devlin.
I'll move that zoning amendment bylaw number 2378 be read a second and third time.
Is there a seconder for that motion? I will second that motion. Now, any conversation on that? Councillor Palmer.
Yeah, so thank you, Mayor Souls. I'm fine with this. I'm fine with this. And just a clarification, when I made the comment about my neighborhood, I was doing it as to illustrate a selfish resident. Don't change my area.
Yeah, okay, thank you for that
And so just for clarification, understand on my biggest concern about this is not having that public engagement component that the public hearing which is now prohibited. Our understanding, anyways, is that it's prohibited. I think with the rewrite coming up in pretty soon, and maybe just a question through the planner, when are we expecting being ready for first reading?
Through Councillor Palmer, we are hoping, because we got the first major milestone complete, new draft zoning map, the remainder of the bylaw, all the parking regulations, basic provisions, we're hoping to release by the end of May, give the summer for the public to engage, provide feedback on it, and wrap up engagement in the fall and start the council review process. So October, November-ish is where we're targeting.
Okay, yeah, it seems reasonable. This time, when, once this little stepping stone there, it'll give us some time, and maybe it might need some tweaking, and that's maybe one of the nice things of doing a little piece going ahead. There's part of me that definitely says, that should be going to the public, but then there's the bigger thing that which there could be some tweaking. But this is opening up significant changes to our community, and I think that's the thing that we need to understand. I'll be supportive of the second and third reading at this point, unless for some reason council sort of says we need to go some other path.
Okay. Any other comments from council regarding second and third reading? Councillor Lano.
Your worship, thank you. I don't support second and third reading at this time. The changes that are proposed under 2378 would normally, under the zoning bylaw rewrite, be subject to public hearing at the end of the day. I've already expressed my concern that we could be opening a floodgate of interim applications that will maybe even make getting to the finish line, which is scheduled for November, even longer or harder to do. And I certainly think it will make it harder to adopt changes as proposed, because it simply will relate sort of raise case-by-case concerns here. So I'm happy to leave it at first reading right now. I think, though, Councillor Palmer mentioned earlier having a public information session regarding this, and I'm wondering, my question would be, would we not theoretically for this type of change also be required to have a public hearing? I'm a bit concerned about the gray area comment here. It might be challenging, and I recognize and want to acknowledge staff are trying to move forward with things and get things done, and I'm not critical of that drive. But my concern is the jeopardy it puts the larger project in by doing it this way, and the time and resources it takes away from this regarding this particular one, as well as any future ones that could come up in the interim. So I would like to see a public hearing or other type of input session, and I'm maybe defer back to Councillor Palmer, who had suggested that as to when you are, if you're still proposing that, or if staff has some advice on that being required.
Councillor Cherry, and then Councillor Palmer, and then I want to weigh in on both of these subjects, please.
I'm just looking for clarification to the chair, to Mr. Simon, as this aligns with our OCP. Are we able to hold a public hearing?
Through your worship, Councillor Cherry, again, my interpretation of the legislation would be that for this standard residential zone, it aligns with the OCP, and therefore we are restricted from holding a public hearing. Correct.
Councillor Palmer comment, and then Councillor Stapleton.
Yeah, just so a response, Councillor Orlando, and just sort of in general. You know, for moving ahead, I certainly will hope that we will at least leave a 2-week period before going to adoption. As I said, with the second, so normally, not that long ago, you either did a public hearing after first reading or second reading, was typically after second reading. And that's the public engagement part that we're missing, that Councillor Orlando is also referring to. And that is, you know, continues to be a little troublesome to me. In the transitions that are happening in society is we don't have media like we used to, the newspaper information getting out to the public. The Facebook world or the social media world with all its misinformation has become the de facto debate place for the community, to the point that I even printed out a number of the comments, of which there's many very, very, very good comments about, you know, this thing that's not officially going to be heard. And there's some stuff that's just blatantly wrong and it's not corrective. It's not corrected by me as a counselor, because if I type in a thing, I've got days of work and trolls that are going to be trashing me. And so that's the problem of not having the public engagement. So I think we're all sort of struggling with that. Okay, well, how do we do this? And I think I would favor a public engagement process. I would favor a public hearing, actually. It's official, but with the, you know, we held a public engagement that was very much like a public hearing. I think that would be better, but I'm willing to get to the third reading at this point as well.
Okay, so Councillor Stapleton.
Yeah, thank you. Through the chair to Mr. Simon, just to follow up on Councillor Cherry's earlier comment in regards to as OCP and the public engagement process. Can you kind of give us a brief overview of what that picture looks like? Because I'm not necessarily sure. I think we're kind of muddling the waters a little bit in regards to, is this a zoning bylaw rewrite in which we're adopting R6 before the rest of it? in which case, why do we have any kind of public engagement process in regards to any of the zoning bylaw rewrites? Right, like, correct? We just did a YouTube video on the zoning bylaw rewrite. We plan on doing public engagement hearings. So this, in theory, should be a part of that. Right? It shouldn't be exempt from a public engagement process.
And so Councillor Staplener's, just with what you're asking, it sounds like you're making more of a statement than asking a question.
Well, I mean, so maybe the question is, like, the R6 rewrite is a part of the overall zoning bylaw rewrite, which is subject to public engagement. Am I correct in assuming that?
Councillor.
Through your worship to Councillor Staplener, we are proposing broader stakeholder engagement as part of the zoning bylaw rewrite, but I also want to be clear. This is a very small, like very minuscule piece of that zoning bylaw rewrite in the grand scheme. We have taken, there were 60 zones in the zoning bylaw, we're down to 40 now, and that includes the introduction of several new zones. We've gone from a list of 200 uses that are, we have 6 uses to describe a liquor store, and we're down to about 98 now. So there's been monumental changes as part of the zoning bylaw rewrite, and this proposed R6 zone right now that will be RLD3 in the zoning bylaw rewrite is a very small piece of that bigger picture. So I just want to make sure we're keeping in context the scale of this individual rezoning application on Simpson Street that's proposing going to a zone that we don't currently have in the bylaw because our zoning bylaw is quite broken. So we're proposing, let's put a zone in there that works for this proposed development. Let's rezone the subject property to it. And then we're going to be doing the broader zoning bylaw rewrite, continuing down the road with that, at which point if council is supportive of the particular rezoning application before you today, then this would be wrapped up into that new RLD3 zone.
Okay, thank you for that clarification, because basically what you're telling us as a group is that this new LD3 zone is a portion of the zoning rewrite. It's not a total for this section, it's a portion thereof. So that's clarity number one. And then I want to go back to a comment that Councillor Orlando had said, concerned about the ability to get from here to the completion of the comprehensive rewrite in November. And so basically clarifying that you and your department have enough staff for the applications that are coming in, and your job pretty much is dedicated to the zoning rewrite. So you're doing that, you have other staff that are dealing with the other stuff that are coming up, and yes, you're engaging with our community members where they need be and that sort of thing. So from my perspective of being in the building on a fairly regular basis, it appears to me that we are embarking in a way to rewrite things, and we have the ability to get to the end of November and get things done. Can you say yes to that? Or I'm not trying to put words in your mouth, I'm asking you that question.
Through your worship, we are able to process rezoning applications while concurrently working on the zoning bylaw comprehensive rewrite. Having this application go to the proposed R6 zone, which will eventually, if council supportive, go to the RLD3 zone as part of the zoning bylaw rewrite, is a way to capture efficiencies so that we're not drafting a new comprehensive development zone in coordination with the applicant while we're simultaneously working on the zoning bylaw comprehensive rewrite. What will cause complications is if staff were directed to do this as a CD zone or something separate from the zoning bylaw rewrite, or if staff were directed to do additional public engagement for the specific R6 zone, which is such a small sliver of the whole zoning bylaw rewrite. I find that will likely cause confusion with the public. It'll conflict with coffee chat sessions that we have scheduled to discuss the new zones that have been drafted right now. And it will all likelihood result in applicants or members of the public rather coming out just to talk about the Simpson Street proposal. And one thing for council to be aware of, if you are supportive of putting this new R6 zone within the zoning bylaw right now, and we get other applications, those will be reviewed on a case-by-case basis, just like anyone wanting to come in and go to R3 or R4 right now. So council still has ultimate control. So in my opinion, the benign amendment is the R6 zone getting embedded in the zoning bylaw. Just because it's in the bylaw doesn't mean that council has to approve a specific property to go to that zone. And that's the beauty of it. Council gets the authority to say on a case-by-case basis between now and the end of the year as we wrap up the zoning bylaw project, whether or not that zone is suitable for other properties. And the application today is whether or not it's suitable for the Simpson Street property. So I would really encourage council to consider that when we're thinking about direction to staff for public engagement and what the focus of this discussion should be. Because in my view, it really should be focused on the Simpson Street rezoning and the R6 zone. Again, you put it in the bylaw right now, you are under no obligation to support any property being rezoned to it in advance of the bylaw rewrite if council doesn't deem it appropriate.
Great, thanks for that clarification. Councillor Roussel, you have it?
No, my question was addressed.
Okay. All right, any other comments on second and third reading? Councillor Plummer.
Yeah, I'm supportive of the second, third reading based on the overall conversation. Couple silent councillors and then don't really have a sense of where this is going. Yeah. I think it's pretty clear from Councillor Orlando. I think I know where Councillor Cherry is. Not sure on the others, so it's just a perspective when it comes to the vote. Yeah.
Councillor Orlando, you have comment?
Yeah, Your Worship, I'm not going to support second and third reading at this time. My feeling as a councillor is that I've been put in a position that does not provide me many options here. I think, for example, if this leads to disruptive commenting or confusion or disruption in our ongoing zoning bylaw process. The reason for that is because it has been introduced in this way. And I feel we will see many more or several more that will has the potential to delay the overall zoning bylaw. For years in my time on council, we have taken many steps, including CD zones, that are on an ad hoc basis, and that is part of why we are not, have completed our overall zoning overhaul right now, because we approach it in this way. So I'm concerned about those. I do want to signal that if this is receives second and third reading, that I will schedule a public information session, which is something I don't even want to see at this point, but because the zoning bylaw rewrite would require, in fact, public hearings to see through its completion. I feel that we're sending the wrong message and to community members, and basically saying in a mail out to all of the community on Friday, hey, we want to hear what you have to say about these changes. And then the very next meeting saying, hey, first, second, third, final adoption, sorry, you have no say. That's not a good way to go. And I feel I've been put in this position, and I support density, I support the intent, and I support staff's desire to move forward. But this is really problematic for me, and I think it's going to hurt us in the long run by proceeding this way. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Any other comments on second and third reading? Seeing none, all those in favor? Opposed? Note, Councillor Orlando, Councillor Stapenhurst is opposed. This motion is passed. Now, there is a motion to put the amendment bylaw 2378 for adoption on the floor. Is there a council that's willing to entertain that? Councillor Cherry, is there a seconder for that motion? Councillor Devlin, discussion on the motion. Councillor Cherry, do you want to weigh in on that?
Yes, Your Worship. As per my election campaign, I am supporting housing. I'm supporting the OCP, where everybody had their time to weigh in on what the future of this community is going to look like. I support densification. I support smaller units. I support the ability for locals to have a chance to actually buy into the market. This zone fits all of that, and I'd like to push forward and see it adopted.
All right, Councillor Stapenhurst, comment?
Just, since Councillor Cherry brought it up, and I'm not sure if we really want to dive into this rabbit hole, but prior to us being elected, we didn't have a communications officer, and he's brought up the OCP and the engagement with the community several times now. So my question is, what was that engagement process?
So, Mr. Simon, do you want to just briefly go over the process of the OCP, the 30 plus community members involved in building that OCP and that communication, the Coles Notes version?
Your Worship, Councillor Stapenhurst, I'm not sure there is a Coles Note version. It was the most exhaustive public engagement I have ever seen for a community planning project. So aside from cast a wide net, get the community come out, visioning exercises, I think there was something like 800 or 1,000 responses on the visioning survey at the beginning. It was a little bit before my time with the city when that was initiated. But as I took it over, we had a focus group that was made up of, I believe, about 22 community champions that were nominated from members of the community that were along the OCP for every step of the way. They met somewhere around 15 times throughout the duration of the OCP project to provide feedback on public engagement, technical documents, policy documents. After we had the focus group continuing to work on this, they actually recommended cast the net a little bit wider, and they had gone out and recruited an additional 30 members of the community to serve on policy teams. Those policy teams reviewed and provided and drafted policies that ultimately made their way into the OCP. Staff spent dozens upon dozens of hours going through all of the feedback that was provided from the community as part of those policy teams, as part of the focus group, making sure it made its way into the final OCP. When we had the final OCP done, we did virtual community engagement sessions, in-person community engagement sessions, public hearings, everything, whole 9 yards. I can honestly say I've never seen in my experience as a planner such an exhaustive public engagement process, and the results of it, they do speak for themselves. And if anyone is interested, because what we got from the focus group is they wanted to essentially memorialize, I say that correctly, that process though. We have a document that's uploaded onto the city's website that gives a brief summary in about 6 pages of all the engagement that was done for the OCP to document that process. So it was quite exhaustive, and that is where we are taking direction on any future zoning bylaw amendments being the OCP.
Good. So I have a speakers list here. Councillor Cherry, Councillor Orlando, and Councillor Palmer.
Thanks, George. Just to follow up on that, how many years did it take us to, through public engagement and that entire process that you just described, come up with the final OCP?
Through your worship, Councillor Cherry, it started in 2018, shortly before my time, I believe. Like it was around the end of 2018, and it was adopted July 2022. So we're talking approximately 4 years, probably.
Great, thank you for that. Councillor Orlando.
Your worship, thank you. I will be opposed to adoption for the reasons I've already stated. Furthermore to that, I want to express my opinion that this is going to set a precedent in that any individual who comes forward with an individual application, be it in any other zone that we have under the proposed zoning bylaw, will in fact trigger the same process, legally, fairly. I think that's is what would happen if I said, hey, I've got this commercial application, I want it to be under the, the new commercial zoning bylaw, or I've got this residential application in a different zone. I want you to go ahead, like you have done for this applicant, and head to adopt that zoning amendment that would permit that. Furthermore, here that prior to adoption of the zoning amendment bylaw. So further to that, my question to council is, in their private endeavors, does any other council member have a development application that they are currently working on that would be a potential beneficiary to this precedent-setting adoption of zoning amendment 2378?
I think that's directed to me. The answer is no.
Okay. Any other comments from council? Councillor Palmer and then Councillor Devlin.
Just a comment, because there was a question about the OCP.
Right.
That was adopted. That was previous council that adopted it.
Correct.
It was very, very, very lengthy. And just for those that are following it, that's an archive project on Talk Revelstoke. It's very, very, I was just pulling it up. It's very, very comprehensive. And the supporting documentation, which is also very exhaustive, is on there. And if there's anything that's helping me on this sort of decision is that engagement on the broad level at the OCP level.
Right.
So that's the easiest way is to go talkrevelstoke.ca, archive projects. There's a minor OCP amendment project. Don't look at that. Well, take a look at it if you want, but go right down to the bottom to the OCP, and it's very, very, very comprehensive, and many very high profile individuals in the community actively involved with that. That said, as far as adoption and not having this little period of time, my preference is to hold this off until next meeting. That's be my only hesitation at this point.
Great, thanks for the comment, Councillor Dillon.
Actually, I'm gonna take back my comment. I'm not gonna make a comment at this time.
All right.
Thank you.
Good. Any other comments on adoption? Seeing none, I'll call a question. All those in favor? Opposed? Note that Councillor Orlando, Councillor Stephenhurst, and Councillor Palmer are opposed. Balance of councils in favor. This motion is passed. All right, so we are going to move on in our package to zoning amendment bylaw 2379. We have heard a presentation about this. And so I have a couple of questions for Mr. Simon, our Director of Planning. So Mr. Simon, we've talked about square footage, about what they're able to do on this property. And so when we talk about their ability to put things on the property without going to a development or a zoning amendment bylaw, they're actually able to put duplexes with suites on that property. So we're looking at a minimum of, or a maximum, whatever, of 5 duplexes with suites in there. So the total units then would be, a duplex will be considered 2 units, correct? So we're looking at 10 with 10 suites. Am I right? So a total of 20 units. And then we're looking at the ability for parking. They would have to have the parking, that sort of thing. Here's what concerns me. And so we're going to start this off where I've looked at all of the comments, and there was one comment sent in by a resident that states, probably nobody's going to read this comment. I want to assure the residents that we are reading their comments. So they're able to build those without any, they don't have to come to council. You basically put it through, they can do that. But the affordability of the units is going to go up because of the nature of the project. Now, I know our proponent is here in the room with us now, but if I were to say that we would go from let's talk about what they're selling projects for in this sort of thing, 769, 780, this sort of thing. And just in my guessing of a duplex, we're now looking at $950 million for that duplex. And so I'll actually defer to Councillor Cherry because he's in the housing business. Maybe I'm way low with what I'm talking about. So when we're talking about, I guess my point is this, when we're talking about affordability and building community, so we're going to get some development on that property no matter what. We're building units where it's multiple housing, that builds community. I see that in my neighborhood of single family homes. So I've seen things change over the years. So having been there for a very long time, and I can say my wife's been there longer than I, we look at that and go, we've seen the family get raised, they moved away, they get educated, those who can afford to come back. And we're now seeing a resurgence in our neighborhood of families which build community. So we look at this group of homes that will be built, that's going to build community. It makes it safer because there's more people around. There was a concern about crime. There's a concern about our ability to have residents buy in. This proponent has come up with all kinds of ways to do it. But by allowing us to put these 18 units in with 18 suites, it basically gives the whole project more affordability as we move forward. Now I'm going to stop for a moment because I want Councillor Cherry, who may have more information than I on that, because of course he understands real estate better than I. Any comments that you want to make?
Yeah.
Am I going down the right direction or am I way off?
I don't see any duplexes being sold for under $1 million right now. I believe Stoke Living was the last duplexes that were sold. I think they were, 950 2 years ago, pre-construction. So you can add inflationary and market trends on that. You're looking at $1 million to 1.2, 1.3 for each side for new construction.
That's
Older construction will be
each side of that duplex will cost that.
potentially, yeah. I believe a 40 or 50-year-old duplex over on Douglas Street sold for, I think, 1.7, both sides combined. Not new construction recently. So
Okay.
just anecdotally.
All right. Any other comments? Before I ask if this motion was to be put on the table. Mr. Simon, any comments?
To your worship and all of council, I can appreciate from the community and I can empathize that this is a different development forum. We need to ask ourselves, are we serious about the housing crisis? We have the decision in my mind when I look at this from a developability perspective, to Councillor Cherry's point, you can build 10 duplexes with 10 suites on there right now. You got a variance for minimum lot size that was ever so slight, you could probably get 24 on there total. You'll be selling them for $950 plus with a suite in there. Or we can have 18 row houses with 18 suites that are probably going to sell between $750 and $850. That's the reality of the situation that we're in. I wish it was different, but that's the reality of the market housing situation in Revelstoke right now.
And so when we look at 750 to 850, I know I'm jumping, but when you look at that, is so with what we've seen in other projects here in the community, in that frame, and for this developer who's put another project in our community, he's gone out to the community members here before he went anywhere else and said, hey, you want to buy in? And so whether anyone took him up on that offer or whether they waited till after, but I do know that there's professionals in the community who were able to find housing because of this. And then when I look at the ability to make sure that people in our community are going to be housed, this is a great way to affect affordability for that. It's attainable. It's not what we call low income or that affordable housing project, but it's attainable for those people who are in that middle section of purchase. And so, as a council, what can we do to affect affordability? What we can do is actually move this forward, knowing full well for the betterment of the community, we're actually putting this forward. So anyway, that's kind of my comment. Councillor Orlando.
Your worship, thank you. By way of discussion, everybody supports more dense housing. Everybody supports more affordable housing. And this is something that all members of council have supported in our process and procedure, and something that I've been an advocate for a long time. What I'm talking about is the procedure and how we do this. And the concern being is that we could have been through an engagement process and get to the end line, but instead, by approaching it this way, we are going to raise the concerns of community members on an individual basis. And I think this is going to be deleterious and detrimental to the overall goal. And it's also consuming staff time in doing things on an ad hoc basis. And that has been the genesis of our housing. One of the genesis of our main issues was zoning bylaws that we've been proceeding on an ad hoc basis for the past decade instead of getting out ahead of these. And right now what we're doing is taking our time out, taking staff resources out, and making another delay to approach on an ad hoc basis. I think, and frankly, I just want to state this directly, that, saying like this is going to support affordable housing, lots of things will support affordable housing and more dense places of housing. That's what we're trying to get to by placing a wedge, by maneuvering this through first, second, third reading and final adoption with no discussion, and saying we're listening to community members, but patently shutting them down by just going from first reading to final adoption is not conducive to that overall conversation. I think is going to be deleterious, and I'm frankly resentful of that. So I just want to put that out there.
Great. Your comments are noted. Any other comments from council before I ask if there's anyone to put a motion on the table? Councillor Cherry.
Just one thing I'd like the council to consider, your worship, through to you, to everybody. If a development went with what is allowed, we would see the exact same building envelope with less units. They just be larger units. There's density that's allowed without the rezoning. I think that the rezoning, the smaller units, is a net benefit for the town. Over.
Councilor Palmer. Yes, thank you. Sorry, I didn't
No,
mean to
you're
cut you off.
I was just gonna, 2 more words, it's fine.
Okay.
That's got 2 words there, Mark.
I was kind of leaving it for somebody else to put on. I'll put the motion that zoning amendment bylaw number 2379 be read for a first time.
All right. Is there a seconder for that motion? Councilor Devlin.
I'd
Now,
like
do
to
you want
speak to the motion, yeah. I was sort of hoping somebody else would do it, and we're sort of kind of getting in the debate.
Yeah.
So I think it's appropriate to get the first reading, and generally I'll always be in favor of a first reading unless there's something really strange. So by myself putting the first reading on, I'm absolutely supportive. Whether I'm supportive at the end, that's a different question.
Sure.
So the just a couple comments on the a big part of the question that concerns I've had and Councilor Orlando's had is on the public engagement, other aspects too. The OCP is an important component of this. And by the way, I am entering into this motion in the debate on the basis that 2378 was adopted. Even though I oppose the adoption,
Right.
It's done, so I'm just moving ahead. So we have in place now a zoning. There's this zoning's available, and it conforms to the OCP, which went through a very robust, extensive public engagement part. My concern in general about public engagement, well, this is first reading, and even in the historical way, we wouldn't have public engagement at this point. It's getting it on the table. However, I think due to the hard work of some people that are concerned in that area, we've received 30 pages of comments from the public, and so there's interest, and there's been quite a bit of public engagement. And some of those we've just received this morning. Some of the concerns is, I think the biggest overarching concern that the community has is on the area is changing. It's changing. And that's a reality. That's one of the big struggles that councils everywhere have to do, because there's higher growth, there's growth that's happening. There's people moving in. We can't stop people from moving to Revelstoke. So how do we address that? The concerns, I think that's the predominant of those that are opposed to this, saying, we like the way things are, don't change it. And I think we need to respect that perspective and empathize. And yet we're looking at the larger community as we grow in a community, and the OCP has identified that area for higher density and for infill development, and specifically on vacant land. This is sort of kind of a blend of those two of it from my perspective of encouraging it. Some of the other concerns that I think are very legitimate, but these are bigger things as impact on sewer. We've got the sewer stink issue and the sewer capacity issues, and we really need to wrestle with those our growth in the community, whether it's from ski hill or from other reasons. We're triggering these massive infrastructure, and there's a cumulative effect. The whole weight of that shouldn't be on this, and we shouldn't put on the brakes just because there's these cumulative impacts. So that's water and sewer. We're going into water restrictions. There's people that are concerns. Those are concerns in the whole community. There's concerns about traffic. My understanding, there'll be traffic impact studies that will be required. And yeah, more people. It doesn't matter if it's a 2-lot subdivision, more people, more housing, more traffic, and until we change on how we move around in the community. there's concerns from the comments on environmental impact. And one of the environmental issues are important for me, but one of the major reasons I'm in favor of higher density, net reduction on environmental rather than urban sprawl and bigger areas. Parking has been addressed, it has been mentioned, and then impacts on the bridge. Again, those are sort of broader community things that need to be addressed. The planner gave us a heads up on the parking that we will likely be asked about an amendment on the parking requirements, and those broad community things that we should wrestle. And so I'm just saying for everybody that put the effort into your comments, I think are very, very important. They're things that the community has to look at. The others from those online, a couple comments or a few sort of general themes from the social media world that aren't part of the official receipt from the community, but there was the issue about, I think you addressed it a little bit, Mayor Souls, the affordability versus low income. There's frustration on there about 4th Avenue, like why haven't we broken ground? I asked that question, why haven't we broken ground? That's for the low income housing. The affordability, there's young people that just can't get in the market because there's not enough inventory in the market, quite frankly. And then the whole idea, like again, online, the higher density in residential, our OCP, which has just gone through, has identified that area for higher density. You know, there's I thought a very thoughtful comment about on this theme of changing community values. A person writes, unfortunately, living in a single family home has become privileged and unsustainable both for communities and the environment. We really need to get used to smaller residents. And goes on a number of things. And I think that's an important thing. It's difficult for our generation, Mayor Souls. There was an entitlement of single family, the middle income were entitled to that. And from the days when we were young, the world population has doubled, and there's just not, it's a different world. And you and I might reminisce about those days and why it was better, why we were freer. We could, play street hockey right on the road and that kind of thing. Times have changed, and for better or for worse, they have changed. And now we're taking, okay, with these changes of the community, what do we do moving ahead? So I'm kind of talking about stuff that's maybe more the second and third reading, but those are sort of encapsulates where I'm at as far as this development goes right now.
Great. All right. So any other comments on the first reading? So seeing none, I'm going to call the question on the first reading. All those in favor? Opposed? Note that Councillor Stepenhurst is opposed. Councillor Orlando, clarification, you're in favor?
For first reading, to get first reading on the discussion, I won't be in favor of taking further, further than that.
All right, thank you. So note that Councillor Stepenhurst is opposed. Balance of council is in favor. This motion passes. So we're going to go on to zoning amendment bylaw 2375. We read a second and third time. Does someone want to put that motion on the table?
Point of order, I believe it was 2379, sir.
Oh, pardon me, 2379. Thank you for that. Does someone want to put that motion on for second and third reading? Councillor Devlin?
I'll move that zoning amendment bylaw number 2379 be read a second and third time.
Second for the motion, please. I will second that motion. Now, discussion on the motion. Does anyone want to weigh in before Councillor Orlando?
Your Worship, thank you. I just wanted to point out, how unusual I think this procedure is. On the agenda, this is under bylaws 9A, section 9A. So to reiterate, what we've done is pre-adopted a section of the zoning bylaw, and we have, despite verbally saying these are separate items, we are putting them together. Everybody understands the need to move to denser housing. The question in front of the community is how do we do that? And we have a process which we just started on Friday, advertising our zoning bylaw outlet to gather input from the community on how changes will happen. And the first thing we do, not 72 hours business hours later, is to expressly not listen to community members on the changes in front of them. I think this is a big procedural error in the way we are proceeding with this. I think it's going to be shooting ourselves in the foot. I could talk, if I could insert comments here about how I'm for denser housing and all that kind of stuff. I'm not necessarily siding with anyone. I'm saying that in the procedure of how we are doing this, this is going to be problematic. And I don't think it's the best way of going forward to it. And I would also be concerned about, the flood of new applications we're likely to see for people realizing that they can get their applications in ahead of time, ahead of the zoning bylaw, and that will put our zoning bylaw back further. I just don't think this was crafted in a way that's mindful of council's position and the goals of what council is doing. And I think this is highly problematic in what we're doing it. I'm not going to support it going forward. And my challenge to all of council is, if we are saying we are listening to you, we hear what you are saying as community members on this, then go ahead and schedule a meeting and go meet face to face with community members who have concerns about this, and ensure them that you are listening to what they're doing through this. However, I understand staff might say, now that we've adopted 2378, that that's not possible under the existing provincial framework. I think it's really problematic, and it's really, I feel, again, really disappointed to be put in this position, and that is purely a decision about how we're proceeding with this. I think this is really problematic, and I think it's going to hurt us in the long run. So thank you.
Thanks for your comment. Staff need to deal with every proposal that comes in, and they've dealt with it and brought it forward to us, so it's us to make the decision. Further to second and third reading, my ask will be, I'm willing to put another motion on the table after this, if this passes, to make sure that there's an information session for the developer-led, to go out and actually explain what their proposal is to the community. Okay, so any other comments on second and third reading at this point? Seeing no further comments, I will call the question. All those in favor of second and third reading? Those opposed? Note, are you in favor, Councillor Palmer?
No, I'm just ready to put another motion.
Okay, so Councillor Stapener's Councillor Orlando opposed. Balance of council in favor. This motion passes. Councillor Palmer.
Yeah, so I move that. That's where there is a little error right there, right? That the applicant be directed to host a public information meeting in accordance with Section 7 of the Development Approval Procedures Bylaw 2356.
I'll second that.
Okay, Councillor Cherry is seconding that. Discussion on that. You want to speak to that, Councillor Palmer?
Yeah, just further to your comments and including concerns, probably not satisfactory, but concerns expressed by Councillor Orlando and the others that we've talked about. This will be an opportunity for the community to come out and talk face to face with the developer. In this case, it is directly with the developer. It's not my preferred method, but with the restrictions that have been imposed through provincial legislation, it's a reasonable alternative.
Great. Councillor Cherry, do you want to weigh in?
Yes, thanks, Your Worship. I just want to say that I think this is a good idea. It gives the opportunity for the developer to tell the community what his plans are as they unfold. A fear I have, having gone to one of these a couple weeks ago, is that the community doesn't understand the difference between a public hearing and a public information session. I caution, I just have a bit of caution for the developer that, people might show up with tomatoes, for example. But, yeah, that's,
Well, I think the developer is an accredited developer within our community and within the industry as a whole, and may have seen things like this before. So his ability to express what his desires are for this development to the community members, to basically assuage their concerns and say, this is where we're at, this is it. And if the end result is density, we're not happy with the density, he can explain how that works and go from there. And so we leave it to them to explain, because they're the professionals in their field. However, having heard what you said, I don't disagree with you. So, Councillor Orlando?
Hi, Your Worship. I would like to propose a friendly amendment if possible. Sorry, do we have a motion on the table to have a developer-led? Yeah, okay. And the proposed friendly amendment or amendment would be, and that council request, I don't think we're going to require, that council request that meeting happen on a Tuesday, that council does not have a regular meeting. So what is that, first and third or fifth Tuesdays? If someone is willing to second that, accept that amendment, I can discuss as to why.
Can you accept that as a friendly amendment? So with
Both
this,
mover and seconder are comfortable with that?
yeah, for the sake of having counselors at this one, it'd be great. I didn't see any at the last one.
Okay, so your amendment has been accepted. We haven't voted yet, but you're comfortable with that, Councillor Orlando, or do you need to speak further?
Yeah, I'm comfortable with that. And the point is to have it on a night when that ensures as best as possible that council is able to attend. All of council, being an off night from our regular council meeting, are more than likely to not have work scheduled and can go out to that meeting and be there to listen to community members who, I wouldn't characterize as not understanding or being trolls as people. I would characterize them as being people who are concerned about their community and want to have input and direction on the future of where it goes and what happens in the community. Thank you.
All right. Mr. Pollard, you can make that happen?
Yeah,
we'll
accommodate.
Okay, thank you. All right, I will call the question on the amended motion for the engagement process. All those in favor? Opposed? No motions carried unanimously. Thank you. All right, so that ends that. We're not going to go down the adoption until after we see the stuff with that motion moving forward. Moving on to 11A, staff reports, Columbia Basin Ready Grant recommendation. Does someone want to put that motion on the table for me, please, Councillor Devlin?
I'll move that the funding allocations of the amount of $414,301 from the Columbia Basin Trust Resident Directed Grant Program for 2024, as recommended by the Program Evaluation Committee, be approved by Council and sent to the Columbia Shuswap Regional District Board for approval.
Seconder for the motion, please. Councillor Lucelle. Any discussion on the motion? A lot of work done by the evaluation committee and by our staff, and I'm so appreciative of that. A very good turnout, and so glad to see this moving forward, and grateful that the residents come out in mass to apply. All great quality stuff that has been awarded here. I'll call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? No motions carried unanimously. Ms. Delaselle, do we have any questions from the press?
One moment, please, Your Worship. We do not have any questions from the press, Your Worship.
Thank you, Ms. Delassalle. All right, council, I'd like someone to make a motion to go in camera pursuant to section 90.1 D, E, and K of the Community Charter. Councillor Devlin, second by Councillor Lusal. All in favor? Motion's carried. Thank you. We'll take a 10-minute break and come back in camera.